There are moments in life when fate intervenes in the form of a stranger. We don't plan for it, we don't expect it, but it happens in act of kindness so profound that it shapes the course of our lives forever. This story is about such a moment, about a woman who, in the darkest chapter of her life, was saved not by her family, not by a friend, but by someone she had never met before. On a rainy evening in Chicago, a young woman named Claire stood at the edge of despair. She had lost her job, her apartment, and with it, her will to keep moving forward. That night, she decided it would be her last, but life had other plans. A stranger man, she would later learn, was once homeless himself, stepped into her path and changed everything. Years later, Claire had built a completely new life. She had a family, a stable career, and more importantly, a sense of purpose. But she never forgot the face of that man in the rain, the one who had talked her out of making a decision she could never undo. She searched for him for decades, hoping to thank him properly. This is not just a story of despair and rescue. It's about how a single act of kindness can ripple through time, saving not just one life, but touching countless others. It's about gratitude, destiny, and the invisible thread that connects us all. And when Claire finally found him again after so many years, that reunion was nothing short of extraordinary. The rain in Chicago that evening seemed endless. It was the kind of cold, drenching rain that clung to your clothes and seeped into your bones, the kind that made the city feel lonelier than ever. Claire pulled her thin coat tighter around herself as she walked aimlessly down Michigan Avenue. Her shoes soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. She didn't care. She didn't care about anything anymore. Just 3 months ago, she had a job she loved at a small publishing house. She had a modest apartment with a roommate she got along with, and dreams of one day writing her own book. But one by one, things fell apart. First came the layoffs. She was one of the unlucky ones. Then her roommate decided to move back home, leaving Claire unable to afford rent on her own. She searched for new work, but rejection after rejection piled up until she stopped even opening the emails. Her savings dwindled, her spirit broke, and now here she was, walking through the rain with nothing but despair weighing her down. That night, Claire had made a decision. She had chosen a bridge she passed every day on her way to work, a spot overlooking the Chicago River. It wasn't far now. With each step, her chest tightened, and tears mingled with the rain on her face. She thought of calling her parents back in Iowa, but dismissed it. They wouldn't understand. She thought of her old friends, but couldn't bear the shame of admitting how far she had fallen. To her, the world had grown silent and indifferent. When she finally reached the bridge, she gripped the cold metal railing with trembling hands. The river below was dark and restless, waves slapping against the concrete walls. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from a grim determination. She whispered softly, almost apologetically, "I can't do this anymore." But before she could climb over, a voice broke through the night. "Miss, you shouldn't be out here alone in this weather." Claire froze. A man stood a few feet away, his figure shadowed by the dim streetlight. He was tall, his clothes shabby, his beard unkempt. He carried a plastic bag with a few belongings and had the unmistakable look of someone who lived on the streets. At first, Claire felt defensive. What did he want from her? But then she saw his eyes, gentle, steady, and deeply concerned. "I'm fine," Claire muttered, turning slightly away. "No, you're not," he said softly, walking closer but keeping his distance. "I know that look. I've had it myself." His words struck her like a lightning bolt. She wanted to protest, but her throat closed up, and instead of anger, she felt tears streaming harder down her face. She buried her head in her hands. The man set his bag down and slowly approached the railing. "Listen," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, it's not the way. Trust me, I've been where you are. I've lost everything. I've slept under these bridges. I've begged for food, but I'm still here." Claire shook her head. "You don't understand." "I do," he insisted gently. You think no one cares, but I care? Right now, I care. And if a broken down man like me can keep going, so can you. The raw sincerity in his voice disarmed her. She looked at him properly, now his worn jacket, his tired face, but those steady eyes that spoke of pain survived, not just endured. For the first time in weeks, she felt someone truly saw her. He extended a hand toward her, not forcefully, but with patience. Come on, let's get you out of the rain. There's a diner down the street that doesn't mind me sitting in for a while. I'll buy you a coffee. It's not much, but it's warm. Something inside Claire broke open. A stranger with so little was offering her kindness she hadn't found in anyone else. Her body shook with sobs as she finally stepped back. From the edge, her hands letting go of the railing, the man's shoulders relaxed with relief. He picked up his bag and walked beside her, not asking questions, not prying, just quietly guiding her away from the bridge and toward the faint neon glow of the diner ahead. That night, Claire didn't end her life. Instead, she sat in a cracked vinyl booth, sipping bitter coffee across from a homeless man whose name she didn't even know, and listened as he told her that tomorrow could still be different. The diner smelled faintly of burnt coffee and fried food, the kind of place most people ignored as they rushed home from work. Okay. That night, it felt like a sanctuary. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the windows fogged from the heat inside, contrasting with the cold rain outside. She sat in the booth across from the stranger, her hands wrapped tightly around the steaming cup he had placed in front of her. He hadn't asked her name, and she hadn't asked his. There was no small talk, no forced pleasantries. It's just two people, sitting across from each other, one broken, the other weathered, both silently acknowledging the weight of survival. After a long pause, the man finally spoke. You probably think I'm crazy for stopping you. Claire shook her head, her voice still hoarse from crying. No, you saved me. The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. I didn't save you. You made the choice to step back. That was all you. She wanted to argue, but something in his tone told her he wasn't trying to be modest. He genuinely believed it. For the next hour, he told her pieces of his own story. His name was Thomas. He'd once been a construction worker with a wife and a daughter. But after an accident left him unable to work for months, the medical bills piled up. His marriage collapsed under the strain. He started drinking, then lost his home, and soon he was just another face on the streets that people walked past without a second glance. But I'm still here, Thomas said quietly, looking down at his weathered hands. Every day I remind myself that the story isn't over until it's over. Some days are harder than others, but I hold on. And you've got so much more ahead of you than I do. Don't throw it away. Claire listened, her heart aching at the raw honesty in his words. For weeks, she had felt invisible, unheard, as though her pain didn't matter. Yet here was a man with nothing, giving her the one thing she desperately needed. Hope. By the time the diner closed, the rain had slowed outside. Claire walked out with Thomas, not sure what to say. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small compared to what he had given her. At the corner where their paths split, Thomas turned to her. Promise me something, he said gently. What? That you'll give yourself another chance, just one more day. And when tomorrow comes, another. Keep stringing those days together, and before you know it, you'll have a life worth living again. Claire nodded, her throat tight. I promise. They said goodbye, and just like that, Thomas disappeared into the night. The following morning, when Claire woke in the small shelter she had reluctantly gone back to, something felt different. The despair hadn't vanished, but it no longer consumed her. For the first time in weeks, she thought maybe tomorrow can be better. She kept her promise. She applied for more jobs, even though her hands trembled as she typed each cover letter. She reached out to an old college friend, swallowing her pride and admitting she needed help. The friend offered her a couch to sleep on until she got back on her feet. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The rejections still came, but Thomas's voice echoed in her mind. One more day. Then another. 2 months later, she landed a position at a local library. Nothing glamorous, but steady work surrounded by books. She found a small room to rent, began attending free therapy sessions offered by a community program, and even started writing again short stories, scribbled in a notebook late at night. Each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. She knew she wasn't magically healed, but she was moving, and that movement mattered. And always in the back of her mind was Thomas. She replayed that night on the bridge, the way he had looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. She thought often of his promised request, and each time she kept it, she silently thanked him. Years passed. Claire built a career in publishing, eventually becoming an editor. She met someone who loved her deeply, and together they built a family. But no matter how full her life became, she never forgot the man in the rain, the stranger who had saved her life without asking for anything in return. She searched for him. She asked around shelters, walked through the neighborhoods where homeless communities often gathered, even spoke with outreach workers. But Thomas seemed to have vanished, like a ghost who had stepped into her life just long enough to change it and then disappeared. Still, she held on to the belief that one day, somehow, she would find him again. By the time a decade had passed since that rainy night on the bridge, Claire's life was almost unrecognizable from the girl who once thought she had nothing left to live for. She had a warm home, a loving husband named Daniel, and a daughter, Emily, whose laughter could brighten even the darkest of days. Professionally, she had climbed from her entry-level job at the library into a respected career in publishing. To the outside world, she looked like a woman who had always been steady, confident, and sure of her place in the world. But only Claire knew the truth, that her life's second chapter had been written because of one man, stranger named Thomas, who had stopped her from making an irreversible decision. And as the years went by, her gratitude only grew heavier, pressing on her with an urgency that whispered, "You owe him thanks. You owe him your life." She began searching in earnest. At first, she thought it would be easy. Chicago was a big city, yes, but surely there were ways to find him. She started by revisiting the shelters she remembered walking past during those months she had been at her lowest. Some of the workers nodded when she described him: tall, bearded, quiet, but none could say where he had gone. "He used to come around here," one woman at a downtown shelter told her. "Kept to himself, polite, never caused trouble. But it's been years since we've seen him. Some folks drift, you know? We find a new place." Or her voice trailed off. Leaving the unspoken possibility hanging in the air, Claire refused to let despair take over again. She expanded her search. She joined volunteer groups that did outreach with the homeless community, partly because she wanted to help, but also because she hoped deep down that one day she'd see his face again among the crowds. Every time she walked under a bridge or down an alley where men huddled against the cold, she scanned the faces. Sometimes her heart leaped when she saw someone with a similar beard, a similar build. But it was never him. Years turned into 2 decades. Emily grew up, Daniel supported her dreams, and Claire published her own book, a memoir, though she kept the details of that night on the bridge vague, never mentioning Thomas by name. She was afraid of turning him into a character instead of honoring him as a man. Still, the search never stopped. Claire checked city records, even hospitals and rehabilitation centers. Nothing. It was as if Thomas had been swallowed by the city itself, a ghost who existed only in her memory, sometimes late at night. Claire would sit by her window and wonder if perhaps she was never meant to see him again. Maybe Thomas had been sent to her in that one moment of need, a guardian angel disguised as a homeless man. Maybe that was the whole point, that some acts of kindness are not meant to be repaid directly, but carried forward into the lives we touch afterward. And she did carry it forward. Claire made it her mission to show compassion wherever she could. She kept care packages in her car for people she saw on the streets, She mentored young women at work who felt lost and discouraged. She volunteered at crisis hotlines, listening. Two strangers pour out their despair, offering them the same lifeline Thomas had once offered her. Tomorrow can still be different, but still. Deep inside, she longed for closure. Not because she believed she could ever repay the debt. How do you repay someone for saving your life? But because she wanted him to know. She wanted him to see her family, her career, her joy, and understand that his kindness had not been in vain. One autumn afternoon, nearly 30 years after that night, Claire sat at her desk, flipping through submissions at the publishing house. Her phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. "Did you see the article about the homeless veterans program? Credible story." She clicked the link absent-mindedly, not expecting much. But when the page loaded and her eyes landed on the photograph, her heart nearly stopped. There he was. Older now, gray in his beard, his shoulders slightly stooped but unmistakably him. Thomas, for the first time in decades, she had found him. Claire's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph on her computer screen. The article was about a new program in Chicago designed to help homeless veterans transition into stable housing and employment. The man in the picture was smiling, faintly, standing beside a caseworker. His hair had thinned, his beard had gone silver, and deep lines marked his face. But there was no mistaking him. Thomas. Her heart raced. After all these years, decades of searching, wondering if he was even alive, here he was, in black and white on her screen. She printed the article and read it over and over again. According to the piece, Thomas was part of a group that had recently been placed in transitional housing. He had been volunteering at the shelter that had helped him, quietly mentoring younger men who were struggling with addiction and despair. Claire could hardly breathe as she read the final line. Thomas says he hopes to spend the rest of his days giving back, just as others once gave to him. That night, she barely slept. She lay awake thinking of what she would say, how she would explain the enormity of what his kindness had done for her. Would he even remember her? To him, she might have been just another face, another broken soul he'd spoken to on a cold, rainy night. But to her, he was everything. The next morning, Claire drove to the shelter listed in the article. Her palms were damp on the steering wheel, her stomach fluttering with nerves. As she parked and walked toward the modest brick building, she felt almost like that desperate young woman again, clutching onto hope with trembling hands. Inside, a receptionist greeted her warmly. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Claire said, her voice catching. I'm looking for someone named Thomas. I believe he volunteers here." The receptionist smiled knowingly. "You must mean Mr. Turner. He's in the community room helping with the lunch." Service. Claire followed the sound of voices and laughter until she reached a doorway. She stopped, her breath caught in her throat. There he was. Thomas stood at the far end of the room, ladling soup into bowls, cracking a joke that made the men around him chuckle. He moved slower than she remembered, his frame thinner, but the kindness in his eyes was unmistakable. For a moment, Claire couldn't move. Her vision blurred with tears as decades of searching, longing, and gratitude swelled inside her. She took a shaky step forward. "Thomas." Her voice was barely above a whisper. He looked up, puzzled, then wiped his hands on a towel and walked toward her, his brow furrowed slightly as if trying to place her face. "Yes?" he said gently. "Do I know you?" Claire's lips trembled into a smile. "Yes, you do. 30 years ago, on a rainy night, you stopped me from ending my life. You walked me to a diner, you bought me a cup of coffee, and you told me tomorrow could still be different." For a moment, Thomas just stared at her, eyes widening. Then recognition flickered across his face. His mouth opened slightly, and his hand rose to his chest. From that day forward, Claire and Thomas became unlikely companions, bound not by blood or history, but by the extraordinary thread of one life-saving moment. She began visiting the shelter every week, sometimes bringing meals, sometimes just sitting with Thomas and listening to the men he mentored. She watched in awe as Thomas, a man who had once been invisible to the world, had become a quiet pillar of strength for those who felt forgotten. His voice carried weight, not because of authority, but because of lived experience. When he said, "I know what you're going through, but you can survive it," people believed him. Claire realized she wasn't the only life he had touched. She had simply been one of the first. One afternoon, after a long day serving food and sorting donations, Claire sat with Thomas on a bench outside the shelter. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink. "I spent so many years searching for you," she confessed, her eyes on the horizon. "There were times I thought maybe you'd never existed, that maybe I had imagined you an angel in the rain. But now that I've found you, I feel like my life has finally come full circle." Thomas chuckled softly. "I'm no angel, Claire. It's just a broken man who knew what it was like to want to give up. And I couldn't let someone else go through it if I could help." She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "But don't you see? That's exactly what makes you extraordinary. You gave me a future I couldn't see for myself. And now I want to do the same for you, for others. This isn't just about paying you back. It's about carrying forward what you gave me in the months that followed." Claire launched an initiative through her publishing network, a fund to support literacy and job training for homeless individuals. She named it the Tomorrow Project. Inspired by Thomas's words on the bridge, "Tomorrow can still be different." With Thomas's blessing, she shared their story publicly for the first time, not to glorify herself, but to shine a light on the power of kindness and the lives it could transform. That the project grew, drawing volunteers, donations, and partnerships across the city. Thomas continued to mentor men in recovery, but now he also spoke at events, humbly telling his story and reminding audiences that even the smallest gesture, a conversation, cup of coffee, could alter the course of a life. One evening at a fundraiser packed with community leaders, Claire stood beside Thomas as she introduced him. She looked out at the crowd and said, her voice steady but emotional, 30 years ago, I was a young woman ready to give up on life. A stranger stopped me. He didn't know my name, didn't ask for anything in return. He simply reminded me that tomorrow could be different. Today, I stand here as proof of that truth. I built a family, a career, a life worth living, all because of an act of kindness from a man most people would have walked past. And now, together, we want to ensure no one ever feels unseen, unheard, or alone again. The room erupted in applause, but Thomas leaned toward her, whispering, all I did was stop that night. The rest you did yourself, Claire smiled through her. Tears? No, Thomas. We did it together as they stood side by side, both older, both weathered by time, but stronger for it. Claire understood something she hadn't before. Kindness is never wasted. It travels, it multiplies, and sometimes, after decades, it comes back full circle. Thomas had saved her life, and together, they were now saving countless others. My God, he whispered, it's you. Claire nodded, tears spilling freely now. Me, I never forgot you. Spent years, decades searching, hoping I'd find you again. Because you've saved me, Thomas. Saved my life. And everything I've built since all of its exists because of you. Thomas's eyes glistened as he stepped closer. His hands, rough and weathered, reached out and clasped hers tightly. I remember that night, he said softly. You looked so lost. I couldn't walk away, but I never thought I'd see you again. To know you made it, that you're here, that's more than enough. They stood there. Two lives intertwined by fate, surrounded by the hum of the shelter's activity. Claire felt a weight lift from her chest, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. After all the years of searching, she had finally found him, Thomas. She said firmly, her voice steady now, I didn't come here just to thank you. I came here because I want to give back to you, to this place, to the people you're helping, because that's what you taught me, that kindness doesn't stop with one act. It's ripples. If you've made it this far into the story, then you already know its message. One act of kindness can ripple across decades, across generations, across lives. Thomas never knew that offering a few gentle words and a cup of coffee would save Claire's life. And Claire never knew that her gratitude would grow into a project that touched countless others. But that's the beauty of kindness. You never know how far it will go. Maybe today, you're the one who needs a reminder that tomorrow can still be different. Or maybe you're the one who can give that reminder to someone else. It doesn't have to be grand or expensive. Sometimes it's as simple as looking someone in the eye, listening to their pain, and saying, "You matter. You're not alone." So, here's my invitation to you. Carry this story with you. The next time you pass someone who seems invisible, stop. The next time you see someone struggling, offer your hand. You may not realize it in the moment, but your kindness could change the course of their life forever. And if you've ever been saved by someone else's kindness, share it. Tell your story. Because stories like this remind the world that humanity still shines brightest when we care for each other. Claire and Thomas's story is not just theirs, belongs to all of us. Because the truth is, we all have the power to be someone's. Thomas, we all have the chance to say the words that keep another person holding on for one more day. So let's choose kindness. Let's let it ripple. And maybe, just maybe, we'll change the world one tomorrow at a time. Thomas smiled, his eyes shining. Then maybe that night wasn't just about saving one life. Maybe it was about starting something bigger.